He was called Smiling Albert. The charming Nazi field marshal even Allied commanders respected, but behind the grin was a man who signed off on the killing of 335 Italian civilians in a single day. Was Albert Kesselring a brilliant strategist or a war criminal in uniform? Albert Kesselring was born in Markstedt, Bavaria, on November 30th, 1885. His World War I service earned him the Iron Cross First Class at the Battle of Arras in 1917. Superiors noted his talent for organizing logistics and inspiring loyalty. By the early 1930s, he had established himself as a respected artillery officer. But in 1933, Kesselring made a career decision that transformed him from ground-based commander into one of Nazi Germany's most innovative leaders. He left the traditional army to join the Reich Commissariat for Aviation, a civilian front for Hitler's banned air force. Since the Treaty of Versailles outlawed military aviation, the role required operating in the shadows. As head of administration in 1934, Kesselring proved himself an organizational genius. He orchestrated secret aircraft factories across Germany, hiding military production behind civilian facades. He built alliances with aviation industrialists who risked their companies on Germany's rearmament, relationships that required both strategic skill and diplomatic finesse. At age 48, Kesselring made a decision that revealed his core belief: officers should never ask soldiers to take risks they wouldn't take themselves. Despite his artillery background, he trained as a pilot, flying single and multi-engine aircraft to understand aerial combat firsthand. Though he admitted he didn't impress aviation pioneers, he earned the genuine respect of the pilots under his command. He flew regularly until March 1945, logging thousands of hours, a gesture that reinforced his hands-on leadership style. After General Walter Wever died in a plane crash, Kesselring was appointed Chief of Staff of the Luftwaffe on June 3, 1936. From that position, he helped oversee the rapid expansion of Germany's air power, guiding the introduction of new aircraft like the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Ju-87 Stuka, and supporting the creation of Germany's first paratrooper units. During his brief tenure as Luftwaffe Chief of Staff, Kesselring's main focus was supporting the Condor Legion during the Spanish Civil War, but tensions with his superior, General Erhard Milch, quickly escalated. Unlike his predecessor Wever, Kesselring struggled to shape a long-term strategy and soon requested a transfer to a field command. Hermann Göring took notice and appointed Kesselring to command Luftgau 3 in Dresden. In 1937, he became General de Flieger, advancing rapidly through the Luftwaffe ranks. By 1938, Kesselring was put in command of Luftlotte 1, one of the primary operational divisions of the German Luftwaffe during the war. When Germany launched its invasion of Poland, Kesselring's Luftlotte 1 supported Army Group North under General Oberst Fedor von Bock, providing air cover as German forces swept through the northern corridor. His coordination during the Polish campaign revealed a sharp understanding of modern warfare. He prioritized strikes on enemy airfields to neutralize opposition, then shifted to close air support, hammering supply lines and troop concentrations. This same systematic approach continued in France, where Kesselring's Luftlotte 2 provided critical support for fast-moving ground forces. For his role in the Western Campaign, Kesselring was promoted General Field Marshal during the 1940 Field Marshal ceremony, an honor that marked his rise into the highest ranks of Hitler's military elite. But Kesselring's true military test came in 1943 in Italy. The Allies had overwhelming superiority in men, equipment, and naval power. Kesselring, with limited German resources, was tasked with defending the entire peninsula. Italy's mountainous terrain became his greatest weapon. He transformed the landscape into a layered fortress. The Volturno line forced Allied troops to cross rivers under fire. Behind it, the Bernhard and Gustav lines offered fallbacks, each costing the Allies time and blood. Every hill became a strong point, every river a trap. Kesselring's genius lay not just in digging in, but in knowing when to let go. He used mobile reserves and calculated retreats, allowing the Allies to take ground that wasn't worth holding, then counterattacked when they advanced into vulnerable positions. This fluid approach stalled the Allied advance for months. General Mark Clark of the US Fifth Army called Kesselring one of the ablest officers in the Hitler armies. British commander Harold Alexander praised his tactical skill in dispatches to London. These weren't polite courtesies, they were professional respect from men forced to outthink him in real time. Kesselring had redefined defensive warfare. He fused air, artillery, and infantry with a precision rare in retreating armies. Allied intelligence studied his methods, poring over captured plans to understand how he created so much resistance with so few resources. His tactics bought Germany time to reinforce elsewhere, time to produce more weapons, time to harden defenses to the north. His battlefield brilliance saved German lives. But even as he earned praise from his enemies, Kesselring was wielding a second kind of authority, one that would ultimately define him far more than any defensive line ever could. While Kesselring commanded admiration on the battlefield, his role as Wehrmacht Commander-in-Chief South gave him authority far beyond tactics. He oversaw anti-partisan operations across occupied Italy, a responsibility that placed him at the center of decisions involving civilian lives. The contrast between his reputation and his orders reveal a leader who drew stark lines between military conduct and the realities of occupation. In one moment, he protected cultural landmarks in Rome. In another, he approved actions that devastated entire communities suspected of harboring resistance fighters. On June 17, 1944, Kesselring issued a directive called New Measures for Combating Partisan, in which he authorized the use of extreme force, urging his troops to act with utmost severity and not to hesitate even if mistakes were made. The order went further, assuring soldiers they would not be held accountable for exceeding normal restraint in their methods. It was a clear message. Harshness would not just be tolerated, it would be protected. Kesselring also authorized the massive employment of artillery, flamethrowers, armored cars, and public executions in areas linked to partisan activity. Civilian casualties were not only anticipated, they were implicitly accepted. This policy introduced a fixed logic to retribution. Field commanders were expected to report partisan incidents and propose proportional responses. These requests moved through command channels, where they were viewed and signed by Kesselring's staff, sometimes by the Field Marshal himself. The process blurred the line between military necessity and punitive brutality. Kesselring's command preserved Rome's historic bridges, but elsewhere authorized the destruction of villages and forced displacement of entire populations. His signature appeared on key documents that later formed the core of the prosecution's case. These weren't battlefield judgments made in the fog of war, they were deliberate decisions, approved from behind a desk, and one such decision would culminate in the most infamous massacre of his command. On March 23, 1944, 12 members of the communist-aligned resistance group, Gruppo di Azione Patriottica, launched a bold attack on a German SS police column marching through Rome's Via Rasella. A hidden bomb killed 28 German troops. The partisans escaped, leaving behind a scene of chaos and triggering swift retribution. Herbert Kappler, head of the German security police in Rome, was tasked with overseeing the response. Kesselring's standing order, 10 Italians for every German casualty, was quickly confirmed by Hitler himself. The directive was clear: the reprisal had to be carried out within 24 hours. Kappler's list initially named 271 detainees, but that number wasn't enough. To meet the quota, he expanded the criteria to include political prisoners, Jews, and others deemed undesirable by the regime. Rome's fascist police chief, Pietro Caruso, provided more names from local prisons. The final number reached 335, deliberately exceeding the requirement. Throughout the day on March 24th, the chosen prisoners were transported to the unused Adriatine caves outside Rome. Many believed they were being moved to other facilities. The German personnel assigned to carry out the operation, some reportedly unfamiliar with such duties, were given alcohol to steady themselves. The victims were taken into the caves in small groups. What followed was systematic, quiet, and devastating. Among those lost were men from every walk of Roman life: doctors, teachers, students, and clergy. Some were in their teens. One was a priest. After the killings, military engineers sealed the caves by detonating charges at the entrances, burying the bodies beneath tons of rock. What remained was not just a crime, but a carefully documented act of state-sanctioned violence, complete with transport orders, name lists, and authorizing signatures. The Adriatine massacre would become a turning point, not only for families left grieving, but for post-war prosecutors. It was a reprisal carried out under formal military policy, linked directly to the upper chain of command, and Albert Kesselring's name was on the orders. Kesselring's final act as a commander was as surreal as it was symbolic. On May 9, 1945, with the war already lost, he surrendered near the Austrian town of Saalfelden to an American major. From there, he was brought before Major General Maxwell D. Taylor of the 101st Airborne, who in a bizarre display of post-war civility, let the grizzled Field Marshal keep his baton and sidearm. The two men were photographed drinking tea in the sunshine, as if the war between them had been a minor misunderstanding. The images caused a major uproar back home in the United States. But the hospitality didn't last. On May 15, 1945, just days after his surrender, Kesselring was arrested and taken to Mondorf-Laban, a former luxury spa turned Allied holding site for Nazi elite. There, the Field Marshal's baton was stripped from his hands, his decorations removed, his status reduced to that of a prisoner. The man who had once commanded armies was now just another number in an American POW camp, and in 1946, he was handed over to British custody. On February 17, 1947, Albert Kesselring entered a courtroom in Venice where his two conflicting legacies would collide. The prosecution laid out signed orders, documents linking Kesselring directly to civilian massacres. This hard evidence stood in stark contrast to character witnesses who spoke of his tactical brilliance and personal honor. Former Allied commanders had praised him as a battlefield genius. Kesselring stunned observers by not claiming he was just following orders. Instead, he defended the 10-to-1 civilian reprisal policy as just and lawful. His argument wasn't denial, it was justification. Mass murder, he said, was military necessity. Court staff noted his calm, even cheerful demeanor. He smiled during breaks, even after testimony about mass killings. It was a performance, calculated, disarming, and deeply unsettling. His defense strategy tried to shift blame to subordinates while still claiming credit for military victories. But the prosecution had his handwriting. Pages bearing his signature became the trial's sharpest weapon. The verdict came on May 6, 1947. Kesselring was found guilty and sentenced to death by firing squad. The court accepted that hostages could be taken under wartime law but not executed in mass reprisals. Then came the backlash. British public figures, including former Prime Minister Winston Churchill and General Harold Alexander, spoke out in his defense. Alexander told Prime Minister Clement Attlee, "As his old opponent on the battlefield, I have no complaints against him. Kesselring and his soldiers fought against us hard but clean." Italy had abolished the death penalty in 1944, and political pressure mounted to commute the sentence. On July 4, 1947, the British reduced his sentence to life imprisonment. By October 1952, citing poor health, they released him altogether. Italians erupted in protest. For them, this wasn't about battlefield strategy. It was about 335 names carved into stone. After his release from prison, Kesselring accepted the honorary presidency of several veterans organizations like the Luftwaffenring and the Afrika Korps Association. But his decision to lead Der Stahlhelm, a far-right veterans group with deep nationalist roots, sparked immediate backlash. For many, it was a reminder that Kesselring had not distanced himself from the ideologies that had driven Germany to ruin. His association with the group tarnished the image some had tried to salvage. In 1953, he doubled down with a memoir titled Soldat bis zum letzten Tag, A Soldier to the Last Day. The book framed his legacy on his own terms: loyal soldier, brilliant commander, misunderstood man. But nowhere in its pages did he express remorse for the civilians killed under his command. If anything, it was a final salute to the version of himself he wanted history to remember. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, check out our other videos on some of Germany's most infamous generals. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into the war that shaped the modern world. And tell us in the comments, how should we remember men like Kesselring? As tacticians, loyalists, or something harder to define?